So this was actually a presentation I originally gave to the VMware community, trying to get people into automation who are not used to it. So yeah, we'll just drop the joke. Basically, this is a lot of lessons learned, less so about technology, more about trying to influence business process and things that a lot of us do wrong when we are trying to think about automation and not applying it to the business, or not applying a lot of things that we should know or should be aware of before we get into like a lot of large scale automation projects. So who am I? Why am I here? Click over and get this thing. So currently I'm a consulting field solutions architect at Pure Storage. Really, I just put that up there to kind of promote because they allow me to be here. Nobody cares about most of that, but I've been on the customer side for 20 years before I moved over to the vendor side, and I just got a chance to work on a lot of stuff in my career, so I try and share that with other people to make it just beneficial for them and give back a lot of time to user groups. So I just try and contribute back to a lot of things. Currently a leader for the Denver PowerShell and VMware user group. I'm actually dropping the VMware user group and picking up the VM user group locally to try and help folks out. Because number one, Broadcom sucks, and number two, I just like those other communities a little bit better. We have a lot more fun with things. Legitimately, I mean, I've been a customer since 2003, 2004, so I love VMware, I hate Broadcom. That's just what it is. I'm a serial collector of a lot of communities, and I just love giving back to help other people out, and the fact that I have legitimately made like lifelong friends in the communities by just being an active participant. I got a chance to go speak down in Australia for a couple of weeks a few years ago, which was pretty awesome. That, you know, I got a free 2-week paid vacation essentially for people to listen to me rant about dumb stuff for 45 minutes twice in that week. So contribute to the community and you will get some pretty awesome opportunities that come up in your career by just not being an a-hole and giving back. I'm easy to spot in a crowd. Typically I've got, you know, a brightly colored hat, big grin, and a loud howdy y'all. I have little to no shame, especially if you find me at the bar later on, about what it is that's going on and what we're doing. And I just try and share a lot of my learnings with others. If somebody can get benefit out of the things that I've done in my career that have gone good or gone wrong, then I feel better about, you know, contributing back. Because a lot of people gave me help throughout my career, so I try and give it back to others. I always push everybody to challenge themselves, like learn a little bit more, and don't fear sharing. If anybody saw or heard about the, you know, complete dumpster fire of my 90-minute presentation yesterday, it can all go sideways. I almost had to break out the interpretive dance, but got away without doing it yet again. But in the end, like, none of this is really that bad. Everybody has invested their time and wants you to succeed. So by you being willing to give back, I had a couple people that said, man, like that was crazy that pretty much everything that possibly could go wrong in your session did, but you still just like rolled with the punches. Like I even had to reboot a laptop in the middle of a 90-minute session, which was awesome because it came up even more broken than it was before. And two people said, well, it didn't seem that bad really. Like I could totally go do that. I'm like, yes, please get up on stage and like go show me how to do it correctly. So the other thing about sharing is share your perspective. The things that you know, your background that you have, the way that you explain a concept to somebody else is very important. You might make something resonate in a way that I just never will. So be willing to share. And there's always something that you can teach somebody, right? That was the thing that I really got out of reading the Be the Master series and then the Own Your Tech Career book that Don Jones put together. Like, it does not matter if you're teaching somebody how to cook an egg or like change a tire. There's always something that you can do that you can contribute to somebody else that someone did for you along the way, even if it was, you know, a parent or some loved one. And then job versus career. This is really important. Your job belongs to your employer, but your career belongs to you, right? Your job might change. That might be your choice. It might be your employer's choice. It might be completely out of their hands, or there might be a bus that comes along. But sad but true, you will be replaced by somebody at some point. So be in charge of your own career and basically do the things that are important for you and figure out how to make that stuff matter. I came to a lot of this methodology and everything through a lot of, personal time and pain, really. And I try and give back in a lot of different ways because I want everybody's experience to be like this, where you're nice and happy, right? But again, I really just try and be active in a lot of the community stuff, right? VMware User Group Leader, Microsoft MVP, VMware vExpert, Veeam Vanguard, tons of Vanguard, Cisco Champion, and a V Brown Bag host, although that's been light lately. Honestly, I thought it was really cool early on in my career to like be invited to a bunch of these tech groups to be like in the top tier of people that I get to work with for doing all the technical things. I've since figured out like a bunch of those are the family that I would absolutely choose in my life. And the fact that I get a boost in my career by being willing to just give back to other people and help them has been absolutely awesome. And it comes with a lot of career benefits. None of these things are unattainable to anybody. A lot of it is really just you being active and participating and being a decent person and being willing to give back a little bit of your time. The thing I really like about being active in all of these groups and all the things that I've done in my career is I can help people to not have this sort of reaction to all of these things, right? Oh yeah, text color screwed up there. But basically none of this stuff should scare you. Even I will screw up my own sessions and demos and we will all survive. So none of this is that bad. But the pinnacle of my career has actually been that I got to take all this stuff that I did on the side and being a vendor sales weasel and contribute back to our local dads group that started up an actual nonprofit. And we've been incorporated for 5 years. And have brought in and paid out a significant chunk of money for a lot of stuff in our community. Having my kids be able to go look at a plaque where we made like a massive donation for a playground in our neighborhood is kind of a cool thing that comes out of all the other stuff that I do on the side. So find a thing that's your passion and really figure out how to apply your skills to it. So with this, let's go ahead and get started, right? This is really just a lot of things that I've done, seen, or heard, or forgotten and then relearned and written in scattered code and notes throughout a lot of my career. And, just trying to shortcut a lot of the things that we might take for granted or completely do wrong. So a lot of this stuff came out of me starting out by being again, a long time in the community as a customer. My first presentation that I ever gave, which was basically automate yourself out of a basic IT job and focusing on working on higher level tasks. This gets very important when you start thinking about it on the business side to stop being just a pure technologist and start looking at the things that you actually do that impact and provide benefit to your organizations. Again, like even within your own company, you need to push yourself to learn more. When you start thinking about the business aspect of this, understand what impact, good or bad, you have on the organization itself and what part your job plays within the larger machine that is your organization. And again, don't be afraid to not only share your knowledge and teach what you can, but give open and valid feedback about what things are good or bad within your organizations, right? So for kind of a hands around the room, who considers themselves an IT pro? How about developers? I see you in the back, Corey. Raise your hand. Right, yeah. This one's always interesting to ask around here because most everybody in the room will raise their hands that they use VS Code, but who's still using like PowerShell ISE? Anybody? Still a couple? Really, Corey? Really? Okay. Okay. Anybody still using something else that's a different IDE like PowerShell Studio? Still? Okay, yep. I still have a couple of environments, yeah. Notepad I know is you. That's all you. Fine. Man. With the Dvorak keyboard layout, appreciate it. That's, yeah, no. No. Who's actually using source control for their code? Okay. Who's using source control for their documentation? Ooh, nice. It's a much bigger number than last year, and I'm happy about that. Who's doing any sort of unit testing for their code? All right. This is awesome for me to see just compared to like asking some of these questions last year that it's moving along. Who's doing code linting or code validation or full CI/CD pipelines to just like validate your code before it even gets checked in? Nice. All right, cool. How many PowerShell experts in the room? Really? I'm pretty sure it's most of y'all, just nobody else, like nobody ever feels like they're that way. Okay. Good. Really, the important stuff about this is we're all learning, but just be sure to write these things down and share it with other people, right? One of the guys I work with has this fantastically funny saying to me that like the only difference between science and screwing around is writing it down. I'm like, it's not bad. But yeah, like especially when you start thinking about automation and thinking about what you're doing for improvements over time and how you're going to make an impact back to the business, write these things down, right? Your risks, your assumptions, the minimum requirements that you have, the things you've achieved over time, you want to be able to like give that back at some point to somebody to show what progress you've made. So why are we here and what are we going to talk about, right? So we're going to talk about a couple of different phases of automation, some actions we can take that will save us time and headaches working on these things in our career. Some of the considerations that you might make would be different based on your skill or your experience. So don't lean too hard into just your own perspective and do things in a vacuum or in a bubble. Think about where your current progress is with automation and even how far you yourself have advanced from where you first started, and consider that other people are on that journey and are just at a different point. They're either just slightly ahead or slightly behind you, but we're all still learning. And also, like, what is it that you're focusing on, and do you know that what you're automating is actually something that is a benefit to the business that you work for rather than just you and your current job role, right? Because everybody in IT is always short on time, not tasks, but we want to make sure that we focus on important things. And how can all this stuff be completely relevant to you, right? It's really, do you have some idea of like how much your actual cost savings are to the company? Do you know how many tickets or how many manual process things don't happen because you've automated somebody out of those individual functions? And are you actually trying to get to like 100% automation of everything? For a lot of organizations, that's really not something that you're going to achieve. And for a lot of us, that's probably not necessarily a thing you actually want to have happen, just because there are a lot of times we don't have a really good definition of what a business process is or what part of a process we play. That's a thing that a lot of us as technologists just assume that we understand, or we don't really want to go dig into it because it requires either talking to people or digging into a lot of things that really are not our job role, even though it's something that we can very easily impact. But consider if you don't have an easy way to actually show this value, start adding logging to your functions, right? Even if you can just say like, I automated this specific process or this thing that someone had to do, or I shortened the amount of time to complete this particular task, log every time you do that, figure out what the resource hours of the person that did that before is, and roll that up to your boss in your quarterly or annual updates. It's amazing the sorts of things you can do or the approvals you can get for things like training and extra benefits if you can actually show them like the work you're doing has a real impact towards like cost savings. Whoops. Okay. So challenges faced by customers. A lot of this is, what I experienced as a customer or since I've been on the vendor side for a couple of years. Small, medium business or, state, local education. Typically the problems that they're trying to deal with are amount of coverage, limited budgets for everything, amount of time anybody has to get anything done, and a lot of times, lack of any sort of training. It's anything you have to do on your own, essentially. Slightly larger customers in the commercial space typically have the same issues of coverage, budget, time. Their app life cycle can be very short or very long. A lot of customers will buy applications or software and just basically run them until the hardware they're on absolutely dies. Or they have infrastructure that is bought on very, very long cycles, which nobody really thinks ahead of time that they're purchasing things for like an 8-year cycle. When you work in government, auditing and compliance, the amount of time it takes to do those and a lot of time that was required to actually deal with those auditing functions and then access restriction to a lot of your environment is pretty much the biggest hindrance that we had in a lot of places. Large scale enterprise, right? They're dealing with scalability, repeatability, time, and auditing. MSPs do similar, but then they're also having to deal with unknown customer capabilities a decent amount of the time. Overall point of all of this is that anyone in IT is always short of time, not tasks to accomplish. So how do we start working on these things, right? We start out with a plan, right? Since we're talking to a lot of folks dealing with automation, this does not matter if you're using a GUI, a CLI, or configuration as code. Plan for success. But when you're first starting out, you need to expect that you're going to have difficulties and failures. You need to be prepared to adjust your plan, but still plan for that success, right? If this is not how you work, especially with your code or how you operate with people, then change that and have that become the default of what it is that you're doing, right? You want to start defining goals well. You want to be explicit with facts, assumptions, minimum requirements. This is the same dealing with code as it is dealing with people, right? Write things down, make sure that people agree upon what these are before you start, right? Even if it's just comments within your code or notes that go into your meeting wrap-ups that you have, or just drop it in your own personal calendar as the description of what came out of a meeting so you have a point in time that you can report on this stuff later on. You're probably going to revisit it sometime later on to either prove that something was said or agreed upon, or you're going to totally forget about what it was and need to remind yourself, right? That's what normally happens. But you want to be specific about requirements from other people. And basically, you just want to have an expectation of what you're starting with and what you're ending with before you start on a project, whether, again, this is automation or business process. This is going to prevent lots of headaches similar to any project that you're working on. My slides apparently got out of order, so we will just build this thing out. But really, like, once you have that goal defined and you know what it is that you're trying to aim towards, you want to start breaking things down with automation. A lot of people, and especially a lot of us very earlier on in our careers, started with automation to try and achieve speed and performance, right? Those are great. They're an advantage to the things that you do. That's not the benefit of automation to your organization. The benefits around automating these things inside of your environment are accuracy and repeatability, and ideally making it so that somebody else can understand what is going on and that it happens without your interaction, right? So you can actually, like, go on vacation. The concepts are not about impressing anybody with your code or what it is that, that you are the only sole person to do. It's not just about doing it fast. You want it to be done accurately and efficiently and stay that way over time and be able to make adjustments as it's required inside of your environment. But for the sake of automation, this means that you can actually leverage a lot of the skills that you have of understand thinking of these problems in these terms and apply it outside of the technology to the actual core of your business, right? A lot of people don't realize that being an SME who can understand how to break a lot of these things down into individual components and understanding the ordering and process of what needs to happen end to end is super beneficial to a lot of people that don't necessarily have that same mindset inside of your business. I actually had somebody in OnRamp last year who said, I don't think I'm ever going to get a bunch of this automation stuff. It's like, why do you say that? He was like, well, I've pretty much never touched code in my life. You know, he's like, I had a different job 3 months ago. I said, well, what was your job? He was like, oh, I was a line cook. And I'm like, oh, dude, you totally know automation. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, you going to tell me that you don't actually, like, understand the entire inventory of what's inside of your fridge? Yeah, no, I always know what's in there. I'm like, cool. So you know what you have that you're working with, like, you know the end result, and you know that, like, if you're going to do your job properly, that somebody in prep is doing this, somebody's doing this, somebody's doing this, you hand it to the next person down the line. I'm like, 100% the same, just with code. Like, that's all there is to it, right? If you can honestly take that background and skill set of these things that you have and break it down and explain it in terms that are relevant to a different audience, you are going to have a massively advanced career while still doing technology things, right? But the important thing to start with is MVP, minimum viable product, right? Figure out what those minimum requirements are that you have. Figure out how to do that in the best way possible. That's not playing code golf with the shortest number of characters possible. You came up in my last session too, just saying. But really, it's making this thing, again, understandable and repeatable so that somebody else, if they have to troubleshoot it, or if somebody else takes over a function because you've moved on to bigger and better things, this can still operate without you. But it's making those minor incremental changes that you can actually measure that they're going in the right direction, and the next time you have to make a change, you validate, I know what I was starting with, and I know where I'm ending up. The cord's gonna kill me. And again, doing these things efficiently, but not always constantly having to like rebuild the wheel, or just understanding what you're starting with, what you're ending with, and being able to show to someone else that like we've achieved the goal that we all agreed upon when we wrote that thing down. That's going to be the big benefit you're going to have to your organization as a tool maker for a lot of these things. So digging into, like honestly, just some of the basics about this stuff. I typically leave this in my presentations and try and bring a lot of things back to PowerShell. Think about a lot of the basics you learned on your journey within PowerShell, right? Number one, reading the friendly manual. But the first place we try and teach most folks in PowerShell to go to is get help, right? To understand and then start looking at some of the commandlets that were the earlier ones built out. Even when PowerShell was built, you know, in the Windows days, you could go and look at like get service or get process, and that was the most verbose help you would find for how to use the tool. Do not beat your head against the wall. There are a lot of us that have done it way more often than you and are glad to tell you like how to get to that end result without going through that same pain. Just ask for help, right? And again, even if this is outside of the technology and you're trying to dig into the business things, don't be afraid to go ask someone for help, or like Snover was saying, like put in some effort and actually go get a mentor to help you on things that you specifically know and target that you want to get better at, right? Most of us are willing to help anyone in any way that we can, right? As long as you're willing to put in some effort to make something out of that. Pipeline, right? Just thinking of that process of object-oriented programming, of getting a thing and understanding what you need to do to it to get to the next step is a very important thing. If you can understand enough of this to be decent at project management and making sure that scope creep like doesn't hit your code, nor does it hit the projects that you're involved in your business, very, very, very valuable thing, and will save you lots of time and hours and extra work that you shouldn't have to do. I talk about stacking your commandlets like Lego. And number one, it gets me to where I can constantly tell everybody about, you know, getting a chance to build a bunch of Lego sets with my kids, and tell everybody that, you know, I want everyone to actually go put in a business justification for buying Lego to see if anybody figures out how to actually expense them, because if so, I want to hear about it. But really, a lot of this came out of talking to my kids, and the thing that they thought was coolest about building the Lego sets was, like, when I built the Voltron set, or when I built my Nintendo set with them, or like the Atari set, they thought it was super cool to see all the different colors of all the pieces that were inside of it that nobody would ever know are there, because you only ever see the end result, right? But not all the time are you going to be given a decent set of instructions to go build that stuff. Sometimes you get a box full of pieces. Sometimes you get instructions and nothing to work with. So think about what goes on inside of the internals and the things that you're working on, whether this is automation or business process. Be better to the next person about leaving them a better pile of parts or better instructions to put these things together. But there's a lot of times that the things that you work on as well are going to be the internals of some tool or some process that will affect someone else. Not everybody also needs to know all the details that are there, right? Sometimes you can leave things at high level, or can leave more granular notes for the correct audience that needs to understand that stuff. Going back to the point that I was trying to make about not trying to impress people with your code and having these things be about efficiency and driving real value on having known repeatable results for this and being able to hand that off to somebody else. There's a time and place to talk about the deep dive nerd knob things, and that's not every time to just try and make it seem like you are the most awesome technologist in your organization. A lot of your business leadership will not care. Forget what you were told, right? I tell people this all the time. Like, we're not in school anymore. You can cheat and look up the answers whenever possible, right? You should absolutely do it. Even this year compared to last year, like, I used to tell people it was, you know, go search around on the forums for help, or go read the help docs, or working to try and figure out how to change something with PowerShell. You know, look at it beforehand, change it to GUI somewhere, look at it afterwards, and see if you can figure out what flipped inside of an object. Now it's literally just go open up ChatGPT, copy down some terrible code, and see if it works or not. But really, again, you can find answers for a lot of these things. Be balanced in what things you are spending your time searching for and just running. If you're trying to get to the shortest possible answer, sometimes that's okay. Try and work a little bit on learning what it is that you're stuck on, right? The more you learn the process, the more you learn the components and all the things you're working on, the more valuable you will be in a lot of different ways, even if that's just being able to help somebody else or understand what's going on in the back end. But for your company, they're really only going to care that you get to that desired result. They're going to be happier if you can do it in the shortest amount of time possible. But the path that you take to get there doesn't necessarily matter to the business as long as you achieve success. Have a balance of what's good for them versus what's good for you. If you can do some learning, if you can understand some stuff, if you get the time to go work on extra skills or extra tools that you want, take advantage of that, right? It's not a thing that you're always necessarily going to have. Talking about automation basics, right? So following the PowerShell way, even when you're building your own tool. When we started with the basics, we told everyone to go look at the help file, right? Start getting information. Just go look at examples, go look at the documentation, see what is there before you start messing with the environment, because these Git commandlets are the things that are safe. Determine if you need all of the information about a thing before you take some sort of action on it, or if only you need some of the information because you know you're trying to make a smaller change or a smaller impact. Sometimes, especially when it relates to business, you trying to ask all the questions in the world before you try and give some input or make a change sometimes can come across as you are giving pushback on a project, right? Or you have to know all the things before you will engage or give anybody any assistance. Sometimes it doesn't come across that well. All the time, we don't need to know everything all the time, similar to that point on the company wanting you to get to success and those end results quicker. What time is this thing supposed to be over? 3:05, I think? Yeah, cool. Yeah, 15. All right. Think about how you structure a lot of these things, right? Think about how your code is structured. Think about how you start off typically with, again, the concept of what it is you're trying to do, thinking about things in tasks and results that you're trying to make, incrementally along the way. Think about how sometimes you write out pseudocode before you start, right? You'll start with more of an outline before you fill in the details of what it is you're trying to do. Too many of us get interested in a project or want to get something off of our plate as soon as possible because we're not interested in it, and we'll just try and hit the end result as quickly as possible without actually understanding what it is that we're trying to do, and we'll cause ourselves a lot of rework by not having that proper structure or definition up front. Reporting, right? Not enough of us do reporting about what we actually make changes to inside of our environment. And I'm not talking about like configurations that we change, real impact that you have to the business, right? Going back to that thing of if you save somebody 2 minutes worth of time every time a process is run, track how often you are doing that process. Track how often you're reworking things because somebody may not have given you the appropriate information for a project or things like that, right? The more information, the more data that you have that's collected for you to go back through and parse it later on is not a bad thing, right? And again, start with a singular task, right? Think of the way that you're doing modular code. Define what it is that you're trying to do and just start small. For a lot of us, it's a big leap to try and get into dealing with the business side of what's going on inside of our organizations, right? You don't have to be scared of a lot of this stuff, and typically there's going to be leadership in your organizations that's going to be happy that you want to understand more of what it is that you're impacting inside of the business, but this doesn't have to be that you suddenly have to like go achieve an MBA overnight and like forget all you knew about technology to go focus on business things, right? You can start small with a lot of this stuff. So these lessons that we all learned about automation can work very well in our projects or working with other people. As we're into our progress, right, you want to have a roadmap to get to your goal, right? But again, you need to kind of know where it is you're going, how am I going to get there? When you start trying to describe these things, especially when you're being asked to give input on how long some of these things will take, especially if you actually deal with any of the methodologies around like Agile or Scrum, or if you're actually having to report in like how many hours things are going to be. try and keep some of this stuff fairly simplistic, or try and think of, how you can gain efficiencies by something that you've built that is repeatable, that can be used over and over, right? Sometimes the more granular you are at the first thing that you build, the more time that will save you in the end, because that's a component that can be used throughout. Also, as technologists, we try and overload people with a little bit too much information sometimes. Your roadmap shouldn't be like this, right? This is even an old version of the CNCF landscape. But when you're delivering these messages back to the business or to other people on your team, are you thinking of it at too high of a level, right? If you're looking at it too much from the architecture level and not enough into the operations, you're gonna miss details, right, potentially, or people are gonna make assumptions because you're not giving them all the details that are required. Sometimes if you're talking to your business leadership, you're gonna do this, and you're explaining your concepts in entirely too complicated of terms for this. And some of this, I even just got some feedback on presentations earlier on where I had bad visuals just from the fact that, I was using red and green in my PowerShell demos for what was good versus what was an error in my environment. And I had somebody come up afterwards and say, that was really cool, but I couldn't tell what was good and what was bad, like what blew up versus what was good because, I'm red-green colorblind. And I was like, oh crap, right? Think about these things and think about the audience and how they receive and parse the information that you're giving them. Some people are auditory learners, that you're gonna be better off like giving them a story. Some people are visual learners, and drawing things out a little bit at a time makes these abstract concepts easier to follow. Learn how to tell a story, right? How to get people through small steps, that same incremental minimum viable product you're trying to do with your code. If you can explain these concepts to your business in such a manner as well, whether that's your management or your CFO, it's going to take you a long way in your career, right? Don't use the eye charts. Walk through these concepts slowly. Don't over-architect everything before you take a single step, but periodically ensure that your teammates or your business leaders are understanding what it is that you are trying to describe and that they're following along on this journey that you're trying to take them on with this walkthrough. Honestly, there are too many of us that don't have the ability to get along with folks in an easy communication style. That is absolutely a thing that is worth your time to invest in and work on a little bit. Measurements. I can't always tell everybody what it is that they should measure, so that's why there are 0 labels on this graph whatsoever, right? I'm sure some of you guys in the audience probably noticed that like we have a bar graph, but no definition of what it is. There's a lot of times I've gotten this from my business leadership where they're like, that's blue, I need it less blue and more gray, and cool, but like, I don't know how to do that, but sure. Understanding the things that matter to your management or to your business outside of the technology group isn't an easy thing for you to parse out a lot. Right, the way most consultants put it is, it depends. You need to know that you have or are lacking the correct information for you to have a decent idea of what it is you're working on. Sometimes it's better to raise your hand and say, I think we're spinning our wheels or spending a lot of cycles doing something that like probably don't actually need to do. Sometimes raising that up to your leadership instead of you just saying, cool, I can go spend a bunch of free time, doing some training or doing some other thing on the side without giving that feedback or actually measuring all the things that you're encompassing inside of your job role is kind of a miss, right? The way that we think about automation improvements, right? Filtering left, try and do things as early as possible to gain the most efficiency in the process or in the planning phases for a lot of this stuff, right? Think about getting out of your code. Think about how somebody else is going to use the tooling, or if somebody else is going to be able to understand the thing without them being the person that put it all together. Right, learning things in math comes back to understanding order of operations, right? Again, similar to the filter left, the earlier that you do the correct things that give you the biggest benefit, whether that's filtering out information, whether that's making sure that you're working with the right subset of information, whether that is giving feedback to somebody else in a loop of, okay, cool, we made a step, but I don't know if it's an improvement or not. A lot of these things in that order of operations will be very, very beneficial to you if you can figure out how to tweak that process that you work through on yourself. And then automated checks, right? Make sure that you have regular check-ins, that either your code is working or that the process or the project you're working on is actually going in the right direction and is still something that somebody wants you to do. I've had a lot of organizations that were so disorganized that by the time we finished a project months down the road, we heard like, oh crap, we thought we abandoned that thing 4 months ago. That feels super awesome when you've spent so much time and invested into a thing that somebody just assumed was dead. And then software development methods, right? A lot of this, I like some of the software development methods for just thinking about how you deal with a lot of other stuff. Particularly, don't repeat yourself, right? If you're doing the same thing over and over, figure out if there's a more efficient way to do it. Or if that repeating yourself is literally that you were just telling people all the time, no, or here's why, or I seem like I'm the smartest person in the room, might want to change the messaging on it because it's probably not resonating. Or you have a bad boss and need to just get a new job. Sometimes that's what the answer is, right? As we're advancing and working on improvements, right? For a lot of us as technologists, we start with the code. Then we get to like the guidelines. What is it that we're actually trying to do? Some of us may get to the point of achieving understanding of someone else's intent where they just fly by and say, here's the thing that I need, and then take off and leave you with some unknown project. Some of us will get to the point of evaluating ourselves and our work over time, and that's a good benefit. Really start getting to the point of doing that discovery of what it is that you're working on, what impact and what benefit can it have to the business, and start being more aware of other things that are going on and potentially other things inside of your organization that you can apply your skill set to that are higher level functions that you can potentially help your organization with. Getting into advanced automation, right? Sometimes you need to make sure that you are using the right tool for the right job. If you're working on the wrong job, it doesn't really matter what tool you're doing because you're probably not achieving anything that's actually worthwhile. This is not just about code, right? This really comes into understanding that most of what you're doing, especially in automation, is you are documenting a business process in the most efficient way possible, which means you need to understand what that process is, first of all, understand what somebody's actually expecting to have come out of that, even if they're using the wrong terminology or don't explain it very well. You might need to dig in a little bit more. And this is not just the code, right? This is like, what is it that you're actually trying to achieve out of these things and getting yourself a little bit out of being purely a technologist that is focused on just churning out bits of automation. Learn from others wherever you can. I have to hammer that one home because a lot of people will not do this, right? Whether this is you looking at your own documentation that you have written of your progress over time or your notes of what it is that you're doing, or going and asking others, or sometimes pick up a book, right? Especially when it gets to dealing with business management, especially when it gets to learning about communication and soft skills. Sometimes reading from somebody else that is completely outside of your normal circle of influence is a very good thing to just get that different experience. Once you've learned these things, share them with other people, please. With that, that's it. I'm done. Any questions? Anybody? Yeah. Cool. Thanks, y'all.